Hi, I'm Ken,
And I'm Yasmine.
and this is Conversations with Ken and Yasmine.
I'm so happy to speak with C.B. Davies right now, and he is a wonderful director I have met twice, and now we're collaborating on our second project. And C.B. and I actually met for the first time in New York City at the production of my play Blood Sky. And I think we met in an elevator. Is that correct, C.B.? First time?
It was an elevator. I kind of got my way in there. I might have followed you. I was waiting to ask a question, then we were just in the elevator. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to be able to talk.
And it's a production of Blood Sky from T. Schreiber Studios.
Yes, which is an amazing place. I love Terry. The small little conversations I've had with him were really, really amazing. Every year that I was in New York, I went to see the plays at Terry Schreiber Studios, and one of them was Blood Sky.
We had said that we were going to work together one day.
Yes, you did say that. You did say that, and I was like, whoa, because I was still. My experience in New York was very much behind the ears. I had no experience really with acting, and that's why I went there to really dive into it. So meeting you and meeting a playwright that wrote amazing work was just fascinating to me. And I don't even remember what I asked you or what I said, but I did remember that you said maybe we'll work together one day. And I came back to Israel and I started doing theater here. And it happened. So.
It's not what I meant. I would never accuse you of...
Hurt me? Have me hurt?
You know I wouldn't.
Sad. Always so damn sad.
And how should I be?
A little happy.
Like in the movies?
When you went back to Israel, tell me about your work in theater. And a little bit about Jet and Theater in the Rough and C.B. Davies Productions, and that led us to this moment.
CBDB Productions, it's actually CB and DB, my Charles Bryan and Dina Batya, it's my wife and I. There's been English-speaking theater going on in Jerusalem for about 30 plus years. So I'm really like the tail end of it. I came in 2015 and Theater in the Rough only was launched in like 2011, and I launched Jet, Jerusalem English Theater, about 2 or 3 years ago to kind of bring all the theater companies that have been created in the past a dozen years, I think, or maybe 20 years. And I only launched mine last year to try to bring a musical here to Israel. And I was like, we should all work together to bring more to Jerusalem, more works, more original works, and we have such an amazing group of artists here. We can have homegrown works, we can create original works. We have great talent here. Let's find out how we can all work together to get more audience, get more into the community. Jet is about just bringing the community together. And we're just community theater. We're not looking to make, no one's really looking to do commercial theater or profit. So how do we handle that as well?
CB, I have a quick question. So, in the idea of acting as role of producer, what would you say would be your definition of work that excites you?
So, I'm really new to the producer side. I've been doing a lot of acting, and I also like this is my, I guess. Through COVID, this is when I started actually directing. I was like, I'm going to direct this show because I really want to do it. But I personally don't like to direct, produce, and act in the same thing. But I'm doing it because I feel like it can be done as well. What I, as a producer, am looking at is like just really powerful stories, things that really touch me and tell me that that something is important being said that's important here. Like one of the things that got me really interested in producing and directing and just being part of something is also the process, being part of the process. So something new and original. So if I'm producing something that's like, I don't know, I always wanted to do Seven Brides and Seven Brothers because it's a musical movie that I grew up with. But I'm not as passionate about doing it. Like I pushed for the community to do it here, but I wouldn't be as passionate of doing that than something that like is being created now that I could like dig my hands into and be part of. So Song of Solomon, which is a musical that my friends in New York that I got involved with when I was in New York, Andrew Beale and Neil Van Leeuwen, who's actually in Atlanta, they created this musical. And I just latched onto it and I was involved with the process. I'm still involved with the process. And I wanted to bring it to Jerusalem, not only because it's about Solomon, who's a figure from the Bible, but because it's beautiful music and it just hit me as this is something that I can wrap my hands around and be a part of. And I think the same would be said about like when I read Yasmine's work, and just also by connecting with the playwright as well. I think that's something that really resonates with me. To do something like to do Shakespeare is amazing. It's beautiful. I love it. But you don't get to talk to Shakespeare. You could try to, like, you know, you could try to figure out like what the words are about, and there's a lot of people that have different opinions about who Shakespeare was and what he did and why he did it. But to actually work with and collaborate with the playwright directly is something that I feel so honored to do, and I want to respect the playwright's words and what they did, and then enhance it. So I love original work. I think that's really where I see myself best as like something I would love to be producing, and it's not easy because a lot of people don't want original work. They want like the big shots that were on Broadway, and then that's what happens here in Jerusalem. It's like that was on Broadway, that was really great. It was successful, so audience is going to love it and they're going to eat it up. So let's see that, and that's something that is really great. But I rather kind of dig into the process and the collaboration and all that. So,
CB, we reunited only recently. I would say back in, was it April, when I came across your blog?
March actually. I think it was right at the beginning of
the shutdown.
All this, yeah.
And I came across a blog you had written about plays you wanted to present in this during the pandemic because the theaters had been closed. Could you talk about that? Could you talk about your response to the closures of theaters in Israel and how you, as a theater producer, director, actor, practitioner, decided to take power in your hands and just say, you know what, I'm still going to bring theater to a wider audience, and this is how I'm going to do it. How did you come to that conclusion, and talk about your process in doing that?
I really don't remember how it happened, but it probably was some conversation with my wife or something, and I said, I was trying to think of what's the easiest way to really do theater now, in the best possible way with someone on Zoom or in your living room. How can you tell these stories to each other just by doing readings? So the plays that I was looking at really were 2-people plays or 3-people plays, not anything really big, and to be able to just read it with someone else that's near you, or just call up a friend and be like, hey, let's do a reading. I think that was why I mentioned Paradise, your play, because it's a 2-person play. It was about what do you do in your home when you're in lockdown, and how do you connect to somebody, and can you do it with plays? If you can't get 20 people into your Zoom, or if you only have you and your spouse in the house, or even your siblings, what plays would you be able to read? So I looked through all the plays that I had, and that's kind of what I wrote in the blog. I was writing all these plays that were 2-character plays that you didn't need a stage. You could just have a dialogue. So I think that's why I wrote that blog. But I decided to do the blogs in general just to talk about what theater is about and what we can do to try to make theater still accessible to people, and what theater makers can do at this time. Like I called it COVID versus. I called it theater versus COVID-19.
Yes. Yes.
Because we are fighting a battle for the arts with coronavirus. I mean, I've read a few places where what did actors do in pandemics? They ended up going to perform wherever they could, and if they got sick, they got sick. We're actors, we're artists. This is what we do, and how can we do it safely these days? Like I say, stay safe, stay creative. So how can we do it safely these days? And there are ways to do it. We don't need to go to the next town over and travel and hope that there's no pandemic over there. I mean, it's all over the world, this one, and we know about it. We can stay in our homes and figure out how to do it on Zoom or in other kind of venues.
So how has this platform gotten your work out there in Israel? How has it been received by your audience? Have you grown your audience? What's the feedback you have from your subscribers, from your audience, your supporters in this new Zoom platform? And do you foresee doing more plays this way?
I don't know if I have subscribers yet. I'm pretty, like, I'm still working out the kinks of the website of CBDB Productions and whatnot. And there is a Facebook page, and it's slowly getting more likes. But we usually during the time of Yom HaShoah, which is the Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel, and for the Jewish world, there's usually was a play put on by one of the production companies called J-Town Playhouse, and they, right before COVID, they were closing their doors for different reasons, and they weren't going to do a play during that time. So I said, I'm going to do a staged reading, also of a work that was actually done on Off-Broadway, Vilna, by Ira Fuchs. And I had spoken to him already about bringing it to Israel at some point. I said, I'll do a staged reading. And then when I found out that we weren't going to be able to do a staged reading, I was like, hey, why don't we do it on Zoom? And he was for it, and I had a bunch of actors. It was tough to convince the actors that we're going to do it in this kind of forum. The rehearsals were difficult because we're not used to this kind of thing. But we ended up having about 1,200 views or so. I don't know who came or whatnot. I didn't have feedback afterwards, which is almost about even a little bit more than how much J-Town Playhouse would probably get. They do 10 performances, and they could fit like 170 to 120 people. Usually they get a lot the first night, and then it peters out. And we had 1,200 views. We can keep on saying we're going to go back to live theater, but as long as there's these waves happening, to do it is not healthy for even us as actors. And at this point, we know enough to say that it's not going to be healthy for us. We have to find a way to make it work. If the technology helps us, if we can figure out a way for even musicals to be done through this format, I'm sure there are people that are working on it. It should be explored, because if we're artists and we want to continue to do our art, it should be explored. Now, how do you monetize it? That I've been involved in community theater for so long. I'm not so sure. But I think that it's important, not just for the artists, but also for the people to really see that there's still art out there and for it to be accessible. It should be monetized for the people that create the work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be if the work is already out there, because we're trying to be there for the communities and to share the stories with them. And everyone's struggling now. So if we can do it, why not just do it? I don't know if that answered the full question.
Oh, it answers a lot, because it demonstrates how you are bringing people together. Because if not for this platform, I don't know how we would have reconnected.
Right.
It was this situation that brought us together, and now I'm working with your fabulous actors and your team, and on our second project together. So I think what you're doing really is tremendous and should be applauded, because you just stepped in and you're making great art, and you are bringing it to a widespread audience, and bringing all different kinds of people together to do so. That's what Ken and I were discussing last week about telling stories, and trying talking about how important it was to include as many different stories and experiences as we can as theater makers, as writers, directors, producers, actors, and you're doing it. So,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
taking advantage of this is what we our theaters are shut down, and actors are not getting work, but you're taking this moment and you're saying, well, what can I do in a positive step, and you're taking it by bringing this to everyone.
I would do this again if I could. It's a question of who's ready to join me on it. I've asked for rights from certain playwrights, either their agents, or I asked the playwright themselves, and I wasn't given permission. And I'm very aware of the fact that you need to ask for permission, and you should have permission. You've been so grateful for us to really use your work and to perform it, and that's amazing. And I just think that now is the time really to be giving of this art. We're working with actors that aren't even in the same country, which I don't know if would have you could bring them in on a plane, but here we're just getting together on Zoom.
Yeah.
And doing a couple of rehearsals, and we do a play. Like there's two actors from New York. One who happened in the Jerusalem English Theater beforehand, then he moved to New York. The other one, I met her randomly in New York, and I'm like, I'm doing readings. Let's do this. I think also the type of material that we could use is a little different as well, because it's so worldwide now. Because Zoom and the live Facebook, anybody can see it. It's not just I'm telling the story to my audience in Jerusalem on a stage in Jerusalem. So I think that the stories that we can tell can be much more expanded, which is really, I think, is really cool. And we're giving work to the actors. Like, it's not that they're not getting to artists.
Yes.
You might not be getting a paycheck, but you're able to still do what you know to do. And for me, we're always training. Actors and artists, we always should be training and always should be working, paycheck or not paycheck, in order to be able to get into the next step. So I think it's a great opportunity to continue to do that.
That's a beautiful thing, because I know there's a lot of performers out here in Los Angeles that have been watching a lot of stuff during this time, but not really working on their craft. I'll have conversations with actors and writers, and they're telling me what's the hottest thing they've been watching on Netflix. Like, what are you producing in this time? Because I know it's been difficult to just kind of allow yourself to have the space to create. It's kind of hard to see if you can create work that speaks to a larger audience, because the experiences of everything that's going on now it's so filled with so much energy, both positive and negative. But the quick question I had for you is, for the American viewer, what do you think that they would need to know about the theater community in Israel?
That we're inspired by them. I think what I find so interesting is the history of theater. There was the Cold War, right? So Russia was fighting against the United States, but who won the Cold War? We still don't know necessarily, but you could say the United States won the Cold War, right? Who won the theater war? Where did the culture come from? It came from Russia. Russia brought theater to America. Like Stanislavski and Chekhov, all these artists came from there, and America then came and made their art based on what the United States knows. They made the musicals, and musicals were born out of the United States. And now we're here in Jerusalem, where a lot of us are American immigrants, but we have Israelis that are starting to love musicals. There's a lot more musicals being translated into Hebrew. I think that it's just a circle of our artists are learning from all artists all around the world, and they kind of take what they see somewhere else and then they bring it and they make it their own. That's the beauty of art, and if you're given permission to make it your own, that's also very beautiful. And I think that's what we do here. I mean, at least the Jerusalem English Theater, we take a lot of, like, there's one company that loves Gilbert and Sullivan, and they bring Gilbert and Sullivan here, and they make it their own, and they do productions of Gilbert and Sullivan. We did, one of the companies just did Chicago over here. But and it was closed. They were supposed to do like 7 or 8 performances, and it was closed. And the company that did Chicago, they did In the Heights the year before. They did Hairspray a bunch of years before. They did Little Shop of Horrors. They want to do all these iconic shows that were done on the American Broadway stage, and they're honoring them and they make it their own. But I think that we're all connected. I think I think, and also with Zoom, like, already we can even be more connected. Like the story that we're telling, Yasmine, about Bosnia. But it's not just about Bosnia. It's women in crisis. We're telling a story about the world, about what happens in the world. I think all stories like that. In the Heights, even Hamilton is. These are stories that, like, kind of like they're in a certain frame, but they're stories that really happen anywhere. It's not okay to take Lin-Manuel Miranda's work and, like, change it and then make it your own. You have to ask permission to do that first. But his whole thing of Hamilton is that the immigrants are coming and they're creating this revolution of their own and helping America be born. It happens in Israel. All these immigrants that are coming now from America. I came in 2003 from New Jersey. We come here and we make a new home for ourselves, and we join the government and we figure out how to make it work. And Israel is a huge. It's not a huge country; it's a small country, but there's a lot of immigrants. Russia, there's a lot of immigrants that come here, and there's a lot of problems too when it comes to conflict, at least. Which theater always, I mean, Yasmin's theater deals with conflict a lot, but conflict is all around the world. Relationships is all around the world. We all have relationships. We all have brothers and sisters. We all have husbands and wives. I think that there's a lot more that's connecting us to each other than what's pulling us apart.
I think that's the interesting thing about people not looking at Israel and Jerusalem kind of like as a melting pot. On one level, I mean, you're dealing with the level of immigrants from people from just like all over the world, in Ethiopia, and people that are coming in to create this work, and understanding that the tension that breeds with that, also there's a humanity in expressing those stories to a larger world that has such a limited view of what's going on your part of the world. If you were to say, this is Jerusalem, people would go like, what do you picture? But the mix of diversity that actually exists there, a lot of people do not seem to know about.
They don't. Yeah.
They don't know about it at all. And I think the level of diversity that gets displayed, especially when you're in a place where you can develop new work, actually speaks to a broader term of what theater can accomplish as far as bringing people together.
Yeah.
And it's always difficult with new work because it's kind of like people want to, like Yasmine and I were talking before, people like going to the theater to escape and for a sense of comfort. And if you challenge their ideas, they have a tendency to like backpedal a little bit. But sometimes those risks are the things that need to be made. Because I think it's just, as far as humanity is concerned, it's the only way that we're going to get to a better place.
Taking from what Ken is saying, how are you going to get more stories from people living in Israel to create theater from? How to develop new work and shepherd new work, and so that we can hear these stories and the world can hear these stories and build a connection?
There's a totally huge population of artists that do Hebrew, do work in Hebrew, and they make stories. They write stories all the time. I mean, have you heard of Fada or like Homeland?
Mhm.
All these Greenhouse Academy. So these are shows that were created in Israel and then were translated from Hebrew into or were adapted from Israeli television to be hits on Netflix or whatnot. So there are stories that are coming out from Israel. I'm in Jerusalem. Tel Aviv's like the heart of artistry, really. And unfortunately, there seems to be a disconnect between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv artists sometimes. But that's what I keep on trying to think of, how to, even within my community, which is 13 companies and hundreds of performers, and we're not professional performers. Nobody's really getting paid to perform, but we have all performed in at least. I performed in at least a dozen shows, and I'm sure some of them have performed in like 20. There's one guy that performed in like 20 shows. He's a dentist, but every year he's in like 3 or 4 shows, and he just keeps on going on and on and on. He's fascinating. To do original works, I think we've been talking about it, like Nathan and I, of doing play festivals, or somebody I was just speaking to. I'm doing interviews now called Jet Live with artists from the community, also people from other places, Broadway, the Philippines, people I've met in my artistic life, and I've had them on the Jet Live. And I just spoke to a playwright, and he said, "Oh, we could do a 1-act play festival, and then maybe develop that into more things." I think you just need to give people the opportunity to write, and also the opportunity to know. Like for me, I went to New York to pursue acting. I didn't know I was going to write anything, or I didn't know what I was getting into. And now I'm directing Yasmine's play and bringing it to Zoom. But there's a lot of times where people don't really give you the opportunity, and you have to find that opportunity. But if we help each other find those opportunities, instead of like saying, no, that can't happen or that can't happen, that's really a way to kind of bring more voices out. So how you do that, festivals, or just saying yes to somebody saying, this is an idea, why don't we try it? Because a lot of people have stories to tell, they're just keeping their mouth shut because people have told them to.
And it's also one of those things that a lot of people hold on to that work, realizing that it's not finished until an audience has the ability to digest it and comment on it. So there are a lot of people that have like these works that are just sitting collecting dust that have never seen the light of day, because there's that certain feel about, well, what if people don't like it? Well, maybe you can learn a lot about what it is that they don't like, and then some people just don't like stuff. I mean, you can't sit back and think that your work's going to be just loved by everybody. I mean, if you're going to be pushing buttons, but it's worth getting the work out there and having people look at it so you can grow.
Thank you,
all
CB.
right.
This was great. I hope we didn't wake up the baby.
No, she wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night.
Sorry, it's late there, but thank you.
Thank you, CB.
This was great.
Thank
I really
you, Ken.
enjoyed talking to you again this way.
Ken, it was wonderful meeting you.
It was wonderful talking to you too, CB.
Hi, Yasmine.
Oh, well, I was gonna go first.